Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, global sea level rise is believed to be between 1.7 and 1.8 millimeters per year. But if we go over to the NASA website, they show about double the rate of sea level rise as NOAA, and they say it is caused by human-caused global warming. A factor of 2 difference between NASA and NOAA is a pretty large discrepancy and indicates that there's a large amount of error in their calculations. NASA shows that there was very little sea level rise between 1980 and 1994. And then after 1994, there was a large acceleration in the rate of sea level rise. This acceleration occurred very conveniently at the exact same time when NASA switched their methodology from tide gauges to satellites. However, if we go back in time a few years to the same NASA webpage, this slowdown from 1980 to 1994 did not exist. A few years ago, NASA showed about 30 millimeters of sea level rise between 1980 and 1994. But now they show almost no sea level rise during that same time period. The current graph from NASA is very contrived and doesn't seem to match any real-world data. The rate of sea level rise at Boston, Massachusetts has been about the same for a century. The rate which sea level is falling at Crescent City, California is also about the same as it was 90 years ago. In the San Francisco Bay, sea level has scarcely changed over the last 40 years. Sydney, Australia has seen very little sea level rise over the last 140 years, and there's no break in slope at 1994. The rate which sea level is falling at Stockholm is about the same as it was 130 years ago. This break in slope at 1994 in the NASA graph does not exist in the real world. And the high rates of rise of sea level which they show in the graph does not exist in the real world either. NOAA has 365 tide gauges around the world, and the vast majority of them show a lower rate of sea level rise than what NASA claims is the average. In other words, NASA's just making things up. This graph does not correspond to anything relating to the real world. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration made a series of predictions of future sea level rise. The predictions were extreme, high, intermediate, intermediate low, and low. They were supposed to start diverging around the year 2000, but the actual rate of sea level rise was below their lowest scenario. But instead of acknowledging that their predictions had failed, they silently changed the predictions. Now the divergence is supposed to begin around the year 2020. Previously, it was 20 years earlier. They moved the goalposts. They did the same thing at Lower Manhattan. Their predictions were failing, so they silently changed the prediction. It's probable that these predictions will fail just as badly as their first ones did. In 1988, NASA's James Hansen predicted that Lower Manhattan would be underwater within 20 or 30 years, but I'm pretty sure that didn't happen. Over the past few decades, NASA's James Hansen has made many ridiculous predictions about sea level rise. He said that if we kept using fossil fuels, sea level would rise several meters and all hell was going to break loose. In 2007, NASA's James Hansen predicted 5 meters of sea level rise this century. He talked about 15 to 18 feet of sea level rise, which would put a lot of familiar territory underwater. But his forecasts have failed miserably, with no indication of an actual increase in the rate of sea level rise in the real world. Barack Obama provides one of the best indicators of how deep this scam goes. Shortly before he left office, he predicted 8 feet of sea level rise. And then he proceeded to buy $30 million worth of mansions on the beach in Hawaii and Massachusetts. He wouldn't have done that if he actually believed the propaganda he was generating about climate. That's a pretty impressive purchase for a guy on a $300,000 a year salary. Apparently the climate scam pays very well. 35 years ago, the United Nations said that the Maldives would be underwater by the year 2018. They also said they would run out of drinking water by the year 1992. But the Maldives seem to be doing just fine, and now you can buy a home there for just under $9 million. The nonsense being promoted by U.S. government agencies in support of the climate scam is pretty ridiculous. It doesn't have anything to do with science or the real world, but they try to make it look like it's something scientific. Toto has been pulling back the curtain on the climate scam for more than 15 years. He's now a father, and you can visit him and his large family on the web at realclimatescience.com.